Hey folks, welcome to Northern Waters Canoeing. I'm Charlie. Today we're in the Superior National Forest and we are looking to find some really cool plants up here that are actually parasites. It's late summer. We just had a lot of rain, which kind of spurs a lot of those species along. And hopefully we can find a couple specimens today and talk about them. It's pretty cool stuff. So let's go see what we can find. All right, folks, we got our first cool find here. I got to crouch down to get in the frame because these are small plants, only about 4 or 5 inches tall. But these ghostly white plants are commonly named as ghost pipe. Their scientific name, Monotropa uniflora, gives away a little bit of information about the fact that these stalks only have a single flower at the head. Because they're a parasitic plant, they're still a plant. And so they have a flower and they are still pollinated by bumblebees, which is pretty cool. But that's a lot of where the similarities to the plant world comes to an end. And so these are known as mycoheterotrophs, which means their parasitism relies directly on mycelial network or fungi that are underneath the soil. Now, this species of ghost pipe only parasitizes members of the Russulaceae family, which form mycelial networks between the trees around me to kind of help the transfer of nutrients and energy along between trees and plants in the soil. And so how these critters work, how these plants work, is they actually hack that system almost the same way somebody might steal cable or electricity from their neighbor, kind of just like plugging in and finding an access point. These all use their roots, are specialized and called cystidium, and they kind of go right in between the link between these plants around me and the mycelial network in the soil. So they kind of hack that joint in that system there and leach energy and nutrients from that transfer to be able to fuel themselves. Now, some cool things about this that means that because it doesn't have to photosynthesize, it doesn't need to be in an area of much sunlight. So they can grow in areas with really dense canopy, and they can grow in areas where a lot of other plants wouldn't be able to be super successful. Now, these other plants actually around me right here are highly adapted to being in very shaded regions, and this one has kind of found its own adaptation to really hack the system and not have to rely on photosynthesis. And that's why they're white. They have no green in them. They have no chlorophyll. They're not photosynthesizing at all. They are completely reliant on splicing into those networks in order to have enough energy to reproduce and create these stocks. And so a lot of times we see these in the later summer, and we just had a bunch of rain. So they're popping up all over the forest up here in the Northwoods. But there are other species of parasitic plants that I want to show you today. So I'm going to keep getting out there and keep looking. Hopefully I can find another one, I think just right over here in the woods, if my memory's right. All right, folks, we got another cool find here. And again, I got to get really low and into the frame here to show you this one. So this is another really short plant, completely lacking chlorophyll, but instead it does have some coloration. It's got a little yellow that can even appear as red. And this one is known as pine sap. They're actually pretty commonly found underneath evergreen trees. So it kind of gives it its name. I kind of think of where like pine sap might drip, you might find this plant, pine sap. It is still in the genus Monotropa, but this one's name is Hypophytis, which actually means hypo under. Pitis is kind of the Latin translation. It might have been misspelled actually in a couple books, and so we were left with a little bit of distinctions there. But pine, so under pine. That's pretty cool for its name, and because it's not uniflora, if you look closely at it, we see a bunch of little flower heads, even on these tiny little guys. If we zoom in close and look close, we can see a bunch of different flowers on each stalk. And so that's one way to tell it apart, but honestly, they're usually a yellow or red in color too, whereas those ghost pipes, they might have flecks of black on them, but they're going to be pretty pale white. And so that coloration you can kind of get that distinction from a distance based on those. These still hack that mycelial network, and so they're playing the same game as ghost pipe, but they've got a little bit different flower structure, they got a little different color, and through some genetic testing, they actually might not even be in the same genus. I'm still waiting for some more papers to come out and some more research to confirm and deny those claims. But that's pretty cool if we can get two species that have really like come together in that evolutionary track from two different genuses would be really, really cool. However, this one I don't see as much up here in the Northwoods, but maybe I just haven't been looking in the right spots. I see ghost pipe really, really commonly, especially in kind of lusher maple stands and kind of denser forests. Maybe these might just be a little bit trickier. They might blend in a little bit better with that yellow color, but I don't see these quite as often. So if you see them, that's pretty cool. Yeah, so we've got two parasitic plants that both feed off those mycelial fungal networks, and they're kind of stealing that transaction between the plants nearby, especially the trees nearby. This next one that I'm going to go look for exists in a wetlands often, and goes right after the plant host without that mycelial network. It's a different type of parasitic plant altogether. So I'm going to try to stand up in this little thicket here, and then I'm going to head over to a wetland and see if we can find another parasitic plant. All right, we're out here in some awesome sphagnum moss, and we've got a bunch of black spruce around me. And so what I'm going to point out first is kind of the sign of this parasitic plant before you actually see them, because they're so small, and a lot of times you don't even see them. You see what's happened to the tree after they've left or died off or retreated. And so in this tree here, we see a lot of what are called witch's brooms. You kind of see like gnarled, really thick, tufty sections. And so these, even over here, these young trees, they look really, really thick and like kind of sporadic branching that doesn't look like a typical tree. That's a broom. Brooms are caused by a whole host of different things, but out here we are looking for one thing in particular, which is called eastern dwarf mistletoe. So eastern dwarf mistletoe is a plant that actually grows directly on other plants, and they have these root-like things that delve directly into the plant's cambium, so these black spruce's cambium, right into that xylem and phloem, and just suck up nutrients directly. Now, these plants also photosynthesize these eastern dwarf mistletoe, but they don't do enough to completely be independent from the trees. They are totally sapping that nutrients directly from these trees. Now, you can't always see eastern dwarf mistletoe, like this broom here, and up, these big brooms up as we go up are the result of that infection. It's that tree kind of reacting to that infection. But on these today, I've actually got, I can see the eastern dwarf mistletoe popping up. They only get a couple inches tall. They're really, really small. And right now they're even smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the camera. I'm actually going to zoom in right over here. And so in just a second, when you see me zoom in, you're going to see these little plants, and they shoot these seed pods that are gooey and stick to the things around them so they can latch on and then directly start growing from that plant and hacking that system right away, which is pretty cool. You can see the effect of it on the trees. It's usually not deadly to the trees, but you can see it definitely affects their growth and their reaction to it. So what I'm going to do is I'll grab the camera, we'll zoom in right here in just a second. I can show you more about them, but we've got it. We found the eastern dwarf mistletoe. Camera in my hands. We're going to go right up to this tree that I was showing you all the brooms with. So here's a broom, and if we kind of pull back some branches, and oh, there are some really tall ones right there. That's really cool. And so these things right to the right of my thumb are eastern dwarf mistletoe, sprouting directly from this black spruce branch. So you can see the black spruce needles directly next to it. And right in here, and even you can see in the background, these dwarf mistletoes are sprouting up. And like I said, when they get fully developed, oh, there's a really nice cluster of them right there. Their seed pods can shoot up to 55 feet away, and they're sticky globules, so they can anchor in place right away. So when we look around this black spruce swamp, you can see the bottom of this black spruce tree here. The top of this little guy has got some brooms. The bottom of it's got some brooms. And then this cluster of little guys right in front of me. I've got some really good new growth. That bright green is the new growth from this year. But you can see how sporadic it is. And so this tree, as we zoom in slow, you'll be able to see right here. All those little nodules sticking up is that eastern dwarf mistletoe in between the needles there. And so this swamp is pretty infected. And there's a classic broom right here. Pretty infected. It's usually not lethal to the tree, and it can infect black spruce, and it's also been known to affect tamarack. And so this little tamarack guy back here, kind of nestled in with these black spruce, may have it, but I can't tell from here. But cool, so we got 3 species. We've got 2 plants that parasitize fungi, and we got one right here, this eastern dwarf mistletoe, that goes after just the plant itself. Pretty wild up here in the Northwoods. Thanks for joining. If you like the content, feel free to like and subscribe. I'm hoping to do some more nature videos in the future.